Hey, what is up guys? It's PWG Tech here, back with another video, and today I'm going to be going over accessibility design, specifically what I envision Spotify to look like in the 80s and 90s, plus the limiting factors that they would have to experience. So, just a basic overview of Spotify. I'm sure a lot of you know, but for those of you that don't, Spotify is an incredibly popular music streaming service that has online libraries of tens of millions of songs that users can listen to. This is a royalty-based. Spotify would pay royalties for this, and this would be a subscription-based business. You could subscribe for free and have to listen to ads, um, or they would have to subscribe for a flat fee, which allows them to listen to their songs without any ads. They have to make money somehow since they are paying the royalties. Now, in the 80s, it was a much simpler time. The computers back then didn't have access to the internet, as the internet wasn't popularized until the early 90s. And computers weren't even as popular to own because they were pretty expensive back in the day. But for those of them that had computers, they could potentially use Spotify in this way, which I have envisioned. So I think that if Spotify could create ads in newspapers and magazines, they could address people to convince people to essentially order a floppy disk, which contains a database list of the songs. Now, the songs they wouldn't be able to download, obviously, because the computer's operating systems back then did not have that sort of capability whatsoever. However, this database would essentially be a list of songs that users could browse through and look through. And once they write down the songs and the numbers corresponding with the song, let's say like in the 80s, a popular band would be Def Leppard. So Def Leppard songs one, and obviously that's a band, but let's just say like let's pick a song like Pour Some Sugar on Me. That'd be song one, and then Poison was another big one. So Nothing But a Good Time would be song two, and then they would essentially write these down. And I know it sounds like a pain, however, they could really only utilize only so many songs, especially since they'd be pressed into CDs or cassette tapes that they would then listen to on their Discmans for CDs and Walkmans for cassette tapes. They didn't have this really major storage capacity as like especially our iPhones have now. So essentially, basically, the limiting factors is the absence of the internet and the inability to store as many songs with the technology. Now, in the 90s, this prevents a lot easier way for a service like Spotify to be developed, since the internet was widely used and popularized in 1991. So with these new technology capabilities, they could create a database system like this where they could like search the artist, search the song title, and essentially gain access to a lot of these different songs that they could choose to develop in MP3 files. So I know this sounds like Napster, but the main difference between it, well, let me first go over what Napster was. Napster was a person-to-person internet file sharing software that allowed people to use that would allow people to use that would allow people to download music from this and people to upload music to it. Basically, like people would share and pirate songs together. Um, the difference with Spotify was that they would actually pay royalties for these songs, so in some ways they would have legal access to them, and users with a subscription fee could use these encrypted files specifically made for the user so that they couldn't upload them to a website like Napster. And essentially, like the main limiting factor is that the ability for these processes to be pirated. And I think an encryption could potentially work, but there are those who are very tech savvy and could find their way around this. But essentially, the users could download the songs and then remove the songs only through the website of Spotify. So that only Spotify would have access because they are encrypted, and then they could download the songs to their MP3 players, which were the device back in the 90s, considering iPods were not developed until the early 2000s, 2001 to be specific. Yeah, so basically that's it. This is what I envisioned Spotify to look like in the 80s and 90s. Obviously, in the 90s, there wouldn't be as big of a database back then for the songs. That's another drawback that they could potentially face. But I do think this is a fairly serviceable way to do it compared to what we have now. And I think they would both be very popular in the 80s and 90s. I hope you guys enjoyed my video, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one.